present an hour of truth for the battered but proud people of the Empire State. From the financial and entertainment epicenter of New York City to the sleeping and empty small cities and towns of upstate, which once bustled with manufacturing, mining, and farming. We all know from inspiration, history, and nature, we deserve a return to the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York.
Hey guys, welcome to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. We're here in the WYSL studio, and I've got Bob Savage here with me.
Shalom, aloha.
Hello, hello. And those of you listening on the live stream, you guys can already tell there's a guest in studio. We have Steve Filano here from 2A WNY.
Thank you both for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the weather looks kind of like winter out there.
Kaboom. Hey, well, let's not mess around. I mean, let's just jump in the deep end of the pool.
Yeah,
Feet first. Here we go.
I feel like it was 90 degrees like 2 weeks ago or something.
It's nuts. I was in Pennsylvania, around the Philadelphia, Harrisburg over the weekend, and it was like sunny and 55 degrees down there. And then like the last 10 miles when I'm coming up 390 last time we're coming home, here it comes.
Yeah. I had to rearrange the garage a little bit, pull the motorcycle out, tuck it back in there so that, none of that winter stuff gets all over it.
Wrap it in pink perfumed cotton for the springtime.
Yep, absolutely. So today I wanted to bring Steve on the show because Steve's been doing a lot of Second Amendment work in New York, specifically, or maybe not specifically, but highly focused in Western New York, which the show covers almost all of Western New York. And I wanted to kind of bring your organization to light. I think more people need to hear about it. I think more people would want to get involved if they knew it was around. And you've been doing a great job of expanding. So I'm just here to, kind of help bring that voice to more people, essentially. Those who know about the organization probably know about you mostly because you've been going around and pressuring district attorneys to essentially take an oath or something like that to not enforce the SAFE Act. Seems like you've been having good progress. So why don't you just kind of introduce yourself a little bit and then talk about some of the work you've started?
Sure. Well, appreciate the opportunity to be on once again. So I'm Steve Filano. I'm the civil rights advocate and founder of 2AWNY.com. And really what we're focused on and what makes us different from, let's say, some other 2A groups that operate locally, statewide, and nationally is we're not really focused on so much the legislative aspect of this, working by, with, and through legislators, viewing legislation as sort of the sole pathway to reversing imperial gun control edicts coming out of Albany. We focus more on direct citizen action and non-compliance, non-enforcement, and repeal initiatives. And as you had talked about, Andrew, really how this all got started was the latter half of 2018. Something interesting came out of the Buffalo News. I was up one night checking the headlines and noticed that there was a group of several gentlemen in downtown Buffalo at 3 a.m. that got pulled over for a traffic violation. Turned out when the Buffalo officer investigated, it looked like they were, high and drunk in the car. And one of the other issues was they had, a standard capacity Glock on them. Well, standard by New York definition, 10-round mag loaded to 10 rounds. And the officer charged them with a 7-round limit violation. Of course, at this point in time, the Western District Federal Court had ruled the 7-round limit unconstitutional. That had been upheld sometime even before this infraction occurred by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. So I contacted the Buffalo News reporter and said, hey, there's actually more to this story than you've reported here. You may want to check into this a little bit deeper. Contact Buffalo PD and also the District Attorney, John Flynn, because this provision of the SAFE Act has been ruled unconstitutional. Police actually aren't supposed to be enforcing this and could be sued civilly if they do. And it'd be interesting to get the District Attorney's take on this as well. So we did that. And within a couple days, DA Flynn was holding a press conference saying, hey, we have more than 20 cases pending right now with the 7-round limit violation. I'm going to be dismissing all of those and not charging this going forward. And that was sort of a wow moment for me. And I thought to myself, how many other districts all across and counties all across Western New York have, people whose civil rights are being infringed by this, provision of the SAFE Act that's been ruled unconstitutional. And that kicked off a multi-month effort for me that ended in February of this year, actually Valentine's Day, where I was able to get all 17 district attorneys operating the Western District to say, either we don't enforce this and we never have, and or we never will. So they're all on record saying we don't enforce this. We will not charge this provision moving forward. And for folks who may have some situation where maybe they have a rookie officer who charges this or just doesn't know that it's been ruled unconstitutional because the legislators in Albany keep this on the books, that's a very powerful document for them to bring up and reference in their court case to say, hey, the district attorneys have said, or the district attorney in my county has said they're not going to prosecute this, and here's why. So that's where the organization began, sort of where it took off. From there, I partnered up with attorney Jim Ostrowski out of Buffalo, and we worked together on getting the first ever SAFE Act conviction in the state against Ben Wassel out of Chautauqua County, first reversed in state Supreme Court unanimously, and then dismissed with prejudice so he can never be charged with the violation in air quotes ever again.
And I want to point out, if I can jump in there real quick, this wasn't the NRA, right, with hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. This wasn't NYSERPA. This wasn't Scope. This wasn't any of those large organizations that got this done. Is kind of you two, right? I mean, and obviously with advocates and supporters, right, and that sort of thing. But I want to emphasize that because that feels truly grassroots. That Correct. Feels very grassroots. When I talk to my NRA rep, which I think they avoid me at all costs at this point because I keep holding their feet to the fire. I feel like they're truly not doing things. And they always say, you don't know what we're doing because it's not public. And I'm like, well, if I'm a member of the organization, I should know what's going on. Like, if you're taking my money, I should know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then they say, no, we've spent millions of dollars fighting the SAFE Act. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have anything to show for that. Do you? But you guys are coming in here as a civil rights advocate group, right? Very grassroots. And we got a case overturned. To me, that's a huge, huge win. And I hope the people listening to the show think about, wow, grassroots works. I hope they take that away from that.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you touched upon, Andrew, that I identified early on in doing this as a big weakness in the Second Amendment movement was when we take member dollars, we don't demonstrate success in the beginning. Mm-hmm. A lot of groups go out and ask for money, and we're going to do something. They take the money. It usually goes into some retainer agreement that's unlimited. Mm-hmm. It's just hourly, and it just goes on and on and on. And then we don't hear anything for several years. And if the ruling is negative, you probably still won't hear anything. And if it's positive, there might be a press release on that, and then that's it. The progressives on the left, the Bloomberg-backed Moms Demand Action, Everytown for Gun Safety, Giffords, etc., just kick the tar out of us in that realm on the grassroots side. Yep. Doing press conferences, generating publicity, which is my background. I mean, that's what I went to school for. I've been in media and public relations for about 13 years now, starting off in radio in Albany and now up to everything I'm doing now in Western New York. And I looked at that and said, we can just do a way better job at getting the message out, publicizing the intelligent argument for Second Amendment civil rights, and give the movement some hope that we're not dead. We are alive. We can get big wins with just a small group of people and limited funding. And if we can grow that, we can get even bigger and better ones. And the other big focus is, of course, making the organization not top down, but very decentralized. So, going forward, what I'd like to do, branching out county by county, not only in Western New York, but all across the state, is export this skill set, right? Export this capability of, doing press releases, of doing media events, and really getting out the Second Amendment message. So that's a big focus as well.
Yeah, and I would agree 100%, in terms of what the Second Amendment community specifically does. I think that sometimes the community gets a little complacent. They go, well, I made my donation. Right. Like that's my activism. But if you look at Moms Demand Action, I mean, every single community forum, they have at least one person there ready to speak.
Correct.
And maybe 2 or 3 or 4 people in the crowd ready to ask a fiery question to get everybody's emotions worked up and everything. And the Second Amendment community's got to look at that and go, hey, they're wrong and it's working. Like, think about that. They are wrong and it's working. We're right. We need to do what's working so that people hear the right message.
And the 2A community is always reacting to that. Yeah. There's never an offensive event, meaning, we have generated the idea and the narrative and we went out and did it. It's always, okay, a Bloomberg group did something.
How do we react?
Yeah, a leftist progressive legislator is holding a town forum.
Always on defense.
What do we do? Scramble.
Make a meme.
Exactly.
Exactly. No, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a big problem in our community. And I think everybody coming together, if you're listening to the show right now, think about that. Think about the next time you see one of these events come up. A, think about going, but then B, think about why don't we have an event?
Right.
And maybe talk to some friends and reach out to your elected official and let's go on the offensive here.
Exactly.
Let's organize a town hall for our civil rights, or a town hall for protecting our Second Amendment rights or something like that, and get your elected official to show up there and put their feet to the fire and have them defend the Constitution they swore an oath to protect.
Hey, Steve, do you think that one thing that occurs to me as we're having this discussion is one explanation for the success of the political left for the gun control initiatives and other of their pet causes is money. I mean, there's always money behind it. And the reason that all of these town halls and all these community events are so successful is because they are professionally coached.
Correct.
And is there any well-heeled, Bill of Rights loving individual out there who would be willing to help us, mount a well-organized and financed counter-offensive that would be effective in moving this football?
I think in a nutshell, that's what I'm proposing that we do. Now, I can definitely help with the training aspect, getting people trained up to speak in sound bites and be able to think on their feet and sort of draw from a well of well put together talking points that are intelligent. On the money side, what we need to do is get out there and build up the membership dollars required to do these types of things. So that's the other component as well. I did launch a membership initiative roughly about a month ago. I think we got about 100 members in 20 days, which was great to see.
That's sweet.
So we're working to push that forward. And the other interesting thing was there was interest not only from potential members and now new members in Western New York, but the other big sort of stronghold of support for us is downstate. Westchester, in Point South, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
That's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
We have actually communities of Orthodox Jews in Rockland County who are very supportive of what we're doing as well. And we may end up doing a lawsuit with those guys actually pretty soon that weaves in some religious freedoms component to what they're trying to do. All these guys are denied carry permits and they're part of a volunteer security team. That's definitely what this movement needs to a large extent is, the ability to compete in public against these Bloomberg-backed elites. And one of the things that you find, because I've found this, setting up events that actually preempt a lot of these Moms Demand Action events, go out and do a press conference 30 minutes at the public location that they're going to be at before they kick the thing off. It usually sets up a situation where you can set the narrative. And then what happens is the media that showed up, and they by and large do, if you put together a good advisory, they'll come. I think we've only had one event not be covered in 1 year. They'll come out and then start posing the talking points you put out there to the Moms Demand Action spokesperson. They're completely unprepared to rebut those points by and large. They are trained, but going a level deeper beyond the talking points prepared, they're not ready to go to that level, and so you can really seize the initiative.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, and I've been to a few of those events. They've been very successful. Guys, we're going to take a real quick break here on Radio Free New York. We'll be back in a moment.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A-plus Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
A reminder from Abate Monroe County. American bikers aim toward education. Distracted driving is dangerous, so pull over and eat. Don't try to read your mail and newspaper, and stay off your cell phone. Make a mental note to be more alert, making it a habit to expect the unexpected. Remember to look twice. Save a life. Train yourself to watch for motorcycles which are harder to see. Join Abate, and your family will be protected with a free $4,000 accident policy. Ride safe. Ride free. Ride often. Abate. If you ride with us. Google Abate Monroe County.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds
coming back
with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at Simple Tech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A-plus Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
You're listening to Radio Free New York on the WYSL stations.
And we're back here on Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. I just popped over into the live stream. I see there's a couple of you in there saying hello. So hi to Tony, Led, Michelle, and Keith. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you guys have a question for Steve, pop on Facebook, search Andrew C. Hollister, jump over to YouTube, search Andrew C. Hollister, click on the live stream, and you can post a comment or a question right there. You guys can also call in if you want. You guys can call in. The number is 585-346-3000. Once again, 585-346-3000.
So real quick, Steve. So you have this cadre of district attorneys who've taken this pledge, no prosecution on the SAFE Act. Now, has there been blowback from Albany? Has Andy visited some kind of threat to those guys? Because we remember what happened with who's the scope guy in Chemung County? No, it was the sheriff of Chemung County.
Moss? Was it Moss or?
Yeah, that got threatened by the Cuomo administration over the SAFE Act because he said he wasn't going to.
Could be. It might have been Moss. Is that Horseheads?
Yeah. Chemung County. Elmira.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the question: any of these guys got any static?
Not that I'm aware of, but we should be clear. What they've committed to doing here is non-enforcement of the 7-round limit specifically.
Oh, okay.
So not that they're not going to enforce the whole SAFE Act. If they did do that, then I could see how there might be some issues there. And we did have some reluctance among some DAs to not say they're going to do this, but it's a pretty safe position to take since the part of the statute has been shot down by two
unconstitutional anyway. So where's Andy going with that?
Yeah. It's funny because every time I hear about that court ruling and they ruled that 7 rounds is arbitrary, I think is the actual language. And I sit there and I go, and I've asked a couple judges this, and I've asked a couple attorneys, and none of them really want to take it, but they've said it's possible that you could use that court ruling as case law to say that the 10 round round limit is also arbitrary. And maybe someday a case comes up for that, and maybe someday we get to try that as a way to pull back New York's 10-round limit. For those of you who are listening to the show, New York State, before the SAFE Act, had a 10-round limit. I think it came in 96, maybe, or I don't recall where the 10-round limit was put in place, but pretty much almost all the other states, maybe with an exception of 4 or 6 of them, there's no such thing. Because even for, like the Glock, I think a standard mag for a Glock is 17 rounds. You want to talk about some rifles, a standard size for the magazine is 30 rounds. So this idea of them trying to call 10 rounds a standard size is actually what most firearm manufacturers in most states would consider low capacity.
Right.
And the left does try to change that narrative.
Well, they're specialists at that.
Oh, yeah.
They change the meanings of words left and right.
They want 30 rounds to be a high capacity magazine. It's like, no, that's standard. That's what comes from out of the factory. So if we were to take this conversation and move it towards like vehicles, that would be like you go to the dealership, you're looking for a new car, and you look at what's standard for the vehicle. Well, in New York State, they'd be like, nope. You know what? You can't have 17-inch tires. You're going to have 6-inch tires. Those are now standard capacity. 17-inch tires are high capacity, folks. You can't have that. And your gas tank, oh no, it holds, 10 gallons. That's not okay. We got to reduce you down to 4. And we don't want high capacity tanks. I mean, that's essentially what New York State is doing. And
they're dangerous.
What the left is doing.
They catch on fire.
Yeah.
Very big fire then.
Yep, absolutely. So, we're talking about SAFE Act, but I think there's been some traction on red flag laws too.
Correct. Yeah. So we had the victory with the SAFE Act case, and then just this past August, what we were successful in doing is reversing a gun confiscation order against actually a local judge out in Allegheny County. Now, what's interesting about this case, I think for a lot of folks, is it demonstrated that you've always been able to red flag somebody as long as the pistol permit system has been around, which is for over 100 years. It's only more recent that this has been codified into a separate statute and promoted by the governor and the progressive acolytes who follow him, to basically gin up some additional means of disarming people across the state. But really all it's ever taken to do this, and still ever takes, is somebody who a judge believes is credible putting together notarized document saying that this person is unstable and we believe their firearm should be taken away. And if the judge finds that credible, he could send the county sheriff over to do that. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened to our client. And in her instance, and many others across the state, we're starting to document these issues where the pistol permitting regime and gun control in general in New York State is being used to chill free speech. Because in this instance, what had happened is the local judge, who likes to speak her mind, maybe more so than some other people, but the last time I checked, that wasn't illegal, ran into some problems where she had a disagreement with the county judge. She expressed that disagreement publicly at a town meeting. The repercussion for that the first time around was she went to progress her pistol permit and secure that, and the judge wrote back, I'm inclined to disallow the approval of your permit because you've said some disparaging things about me in public before that I didn't appreciate, and so I'm declined to not approve.
Wow.
And he ended up kicking that over to another judge. So we had in writing that, that's a classic First Amendment retaliation right there.
Personal
right
issue entering the judicial system, which is a huge issue.
And then the follow-on to that was an issue with the town supervisor in the town of Allen, who put together this affidavit that was signed and notarized that cataloged all these issues, but not a single one dealt with firearm safety. It was all personal grudges, some issue about, we feel that she's unhinged, whatever these things mean. Nothing is really explained. And, the fact that they were working to remove her from her position as local justice. And, our response to that is the last time we checked, if you get fired from your job or you decide to quit or something like that, the remainder of your civil rights are not suspended because maybe you're not fit or you decide you don't want to progress a profession in a certain field. So, of course, we did win that case. It got to a situation where we uncovered so many of these things that the Allegheny County court judge didn't want to have the hearing because they would have been put on the record, and we would have gone really hard with this stuff. So, in effect, he just said, "Hey, I'm just going to give you the permit back and the gun back today." and no requirement for a hearing. And so that's where that went. The other issue was with regard to the court proceeding for these things, there's no rules. This whole system is made up. And the judges often refer to Section 400 of the Penal Code as the controlling statute for everything they're doing. Of course, that statute doesn't reference anything about gun confiscation or what's required there, or how the court proceedings involving that are supposed to progress. So they just made the whole thing up and actually admitted in writing that when we questioned them, what are the rules to proceed for this court case? How do we do that? Do the rules of evidence apply? Can we bring witnesses? Can we cross-examine people? Who are we arguing against? Is it the court? If it's the court, you're not an impartial adjudicator of the facts, and therefore you can't decide the case. This freaked them out, and basically the response was, we checked with the state, and there are no rules that we're aware of.
We get to make up the rules.
So here are the ones we've made up for you.
Yep.
One of which was when we asked who we were suing directly, is it the court or somebody else? The response was to throw the sheriff under the bus, which law enforcement officers should be aware of all across the state. The response was, well, because the county sheriff executed the gun seizure, he is the opposing party, and you will be suing him. And, they assigned the town attorney to do that. So county sheriffs all across the state, you should know, when these judges are called to account for their unconstitutional actions, they're going to throw you under the bus for this stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a big issue. And the other issue is, who's the accuser? Correct. That's an issue. So, all right, guys, we're going to take another break here, and we'll be back in a moment on Radio Free New York.
It's the WYSL stations, 92.1 FM, FM 95.5 West, and News Power 1040 AM. We'll be back.
You're listening to the voice of liberty. WYSL. AM 1040 Avon, Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, FM 95.5 Spencerport, and WYSL1040.com everywhere.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Avon Gun and Hunting Supply, a locally owned and operated gun shop specializing in pre-owned firearms and repairs. Get your rifle, shotgun, or pistol serviced and tuned before you take it to the field. Open daily. Avon Gun, East Main Street, between the Bank of Castile and Charlotte's Web of Odds and Ends.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at SimpleTech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are,
Coming back, he's done recording.
Call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Business Bureau rating. Call them today.
He's looking at you.
Patient at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Radio Free New York on WYSL, AM 1040, FM 92.1, and FM 95.5 West.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. We are here in studio with Steve Filano from 2A WNY, and we're just talking Second Amendment in New York State. We're talking about red flag laws. We're talking about SAFE Act. We're talking about various court cases. We're talking about how absolutely arbitrary this legislation is, talking about how the left has been successful in getting this passed. And what we're going to talk about now is the question of why is it in New York State these unconstitutional laws keep coming up and they keep getting passed, and why is this happening? How is this happening, and how do we overcome it?
Right. Well, you referenced before the break entry that the 7-round limit in New York State, and now the 10-round limit per the SAFE Act. That's the new standard here. That goes to the heart of the fact that all these gun control edicts are based on a completely made up legal standard, and it's called intermediate scrutiny. So the reason that we have that is because in the wake of the DC v. Heller case, which, as most of you know out there, that articulated the individual right to keep and bear arms disconnected from service in a militia, the McDonald case, McDonald v. Chicago, extended that to the states and applied it to the states. We didn't get any guidance in the context of those cases as to what the correct standard of review is for a court to use to review a Second Amendment case out of those. And as everybody knows, up until December 2nd of this year, upcoming, there hasn't been another Supreme Court case dealing with the Second Amendment. So basically what that has allowed lower courts in New York State and all across the country to do is make up their own system and own standards of review. So in essence, what New York State has done here is get into a situation where their court system and their judges have said, we're going to apply this intermediate scrutiny standard, which allows the government to say at any point in time, because we're doing this for public safety, this is constitutional. And the courts agree. They rubber stamp that. They don't push the government to state its case, to articulate, what is the public safety outcome that's desired. Is there a less restrictive means of doing this? Meaning we don't impinge on people's Second Amendment rights to the point where we have blanket bans on entire classes of firearms and accessories. They just say, oh, public safety, good enough for us.
Yeah.
And it stands.
Now, are they looking at this as like public health? Are they approaching it from a health standpoint or just solely safety, or it doesn't really matter?
Generally, the analysis doesn't even go that deep. Okay. It's more just this is a public safety issue. We think that's been well demonstrated by the fact that people at various points are shot and are killed, and that's enough for us. And the court generally says that's fine. Yeah. And for that reason, it stands. Now, we're starting to see some other cases like Duncan v. Becerra coming out of California, which is going to the Ninth Circuit now, where some of the Trump appointees from the Federalist Society are putting the kibosh on this and saying, no, strict scrutiny should be the correct standard of review, which challenges the government to state its case and say, what is it that you're really trying to achieve here? Be specific. How are you going to achieve that? What data are you basing your conclusion off that says this statute's going to produce that outcome? And then also you need to prove to the court and to the opposing counsel here that your method of doing this is the least restrictive way of achieving that outcome. So, for instance, in California, some folks may be aware earlier this year in March, there was a roughly 5-day time frame where in California you could order 30-round magazines, 30-round AR magazines, standard Glock magazines, the whole gamut for about 5 days because a federal circuit judge out there reversed their assault weapons ban on that standard. Okay. And then an injunction was issued by the state AG, or he pushed for one and it was approved. But people should read that that decision, Duncan v. Becerra. It's about an 86-page decision, and it's beautiful and delicious to take in because that's the type of stuff that we want to start seeing here in New York. And the good news that I have for everybody is, coming up on December the 2nd, we have the first Second Amendment case that the highest court in the land is going to be looking at for a roughly 10-year period, called New York State Rifle Pistol Association versus New York City. And why that's so important is not what's going to be argued specifically, which is this very arcane, odd firearms transport rule at play in the city, which in essence says if you're going to go and build proficiency with your firearm at a range, it needs to be inside the city. You can't leave the city limits and train at an outside facility and come back in. And it's stupid and unconstitutional, obviously. That's why the court, I believe, picked it up and is going to review this. And if they're going to do this, they're obviously going to reverse it because it's literally the only rule of its kind in the entire U.S., any city, anywhere you go. If they're going to do that, they're going to have to summarily look at what's the constitutional standard of review, the court review, that allowed this thing to stand, and then make some pronouncements on whether or not that's the correct standard of review. And given the fact that we have a conservative majority on the court right now, 3 to 4 of whom, at least 3, are very staunchly pro-Second Amendment and I think strict scrutiny proponents. We're probably going to get at least a heightened intermediate scrutiny ruling or a strict scrutiny ruling outright that gives us the tools to then go and roll back literally every gun control law that New York State has. Because if you read the decisions that uphold them, just hit Control F and type in intermediate scrutiny. It is cited copiously. It is the block in the Jenga game that if you pull out, the whole thing falls down. And that's why, as some folks may have been seeing, Democrats like Kirsten Gillibrand and all others all across the U.S. coming up to the lead up of, certiorari for this case and, everything in between, have been trying to stop the court from hearing this case, so much so that New York City has actually reversed its own law, because they know what the outcome is going to be.
I remember that. Yeah. Because they're so afraid that we'll then have case law in place, and then once that happens, their legislative agenda is going to be pretty difficult to pass, because they make a proposal and they'll say, "Hey, what? This has already been overturned. This has already been ruled unconstitutional. We can't do it now."
I don't think that it's going to stop Albany from passing more unconstitutional laws, but it's obviously going to blunt the effects of them, most definitely. Yeah. And the reason why progressives are worried for the most part is there are already cases lined up to take advantage of this standard of review. Like, for instance, we have one in the Second Circuit right now that got argued in February of this year called the Libertarian Party of Erie County v. Cuomo, which challenges directly on constitutional grounds the entire New York State pistol permitting regime. And when we argued that back in February, we assumed we were going to get laughed out of the courtroom. It would be dismissed. These things almost always did up until this year, because the court has now recognized that the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, is now actually reviewing these cases, and we have to actually check our work here and make an intelligent argument as to why we're upholding these things. And when I was driving down with Jim Ostrowski, the attorney that did the oral argument, driving down at 3 a.m. the morning of to deliver this, I was saying, what do you think about simply stating the fact that this case is going to be argued and that the standard of review will be changed? And he kind of questioned that, it's not a great idea to cite cases that haven't been decided. We didn't even have to do it because 2 judges on the 3-judge panel in the Second Circuit, which sits just below the Supreme Court, asked about it directly. Said, what do you both counsels, Jim and the New York State Attorney General's counsel, what do you guys think about this upcoming Supreme Court case? Will it affect this case? We believe it does. Jim agreed, obviously. We were going to say that anyway. Yeah. And the Deputy Attorney General was just floored that she couldn't get this case dismissed, because her whole argument was simply this. Our sole client that we still have on this case that the state hasn't dismissed for what's called lack of standing, he has some misdemeanors on his record, right? Okay. Now, our response to that, and the court agreed during oral argument, is DC v. Heller, the controlling case law for, what the factors of denying someone's Second Amendment rights would be, says the only way you can deny someone's ability to keep and bear arms is if they're convicted for a felony and or are adjudicated mentally ill and involuntarily committed. Yeah. This person has not done those things. And we had a panel judge say outright, he goes, hey, this guy doesn't walk a straight and narrow path, but Heller says that these are the issues here. He doesn't fall into that camp, so he's a law-abiding citizen for our purposes. And the deputy AG, her jaw just dropped. I mean, she thought that was going to be it, and she could walk out. So it shows that the environment in what is traditionally a very far-left court is changing, even with the current people who are on the court, and that's about to be flipped, too. I mean, Trump is in the process of making another federal appointee on the Republican side that's going to flip the Second Circuit to be majority Republican. Now, is that going to be potentially a total victory for Second Amendment civil rights? I don't know. I mean, we've seen plenty of Republican judges and Trump himself back red flag laws, so that, that tells you something right there. But it does at least, I think, make our job easier in rolling things back. Yeah. And those of you guys listening to the show who have listened for, more than just this episode know that I'm a big proponent of the Libertarian Party. Yes. And Jim Ostrowski is a Libertarian. The Libertarian Party is challenging the New York State law there. So that to me is, of course, exciting. And I think exciting for the party to see some Second Amendment victories coming out of a pretty small party. Once again, just like, this is being a grassroots effort, I think we're seeing a reoccurring theme here that it's not
super large organizations making this stuff happen. It's people who maybe only have a little bit of money. More money would help them succeed even more.
Right.
But people that are fiery and active and ready to go out and make a difference. And sometimes they maybe don't know how to make a difference, but they know they're ready to show up and they're ready to do something. And so obviously everybody's happy that people like you and Jim Ostrowski are skilled in that way to help make it happen. So it's very exciting, I think.
You know,
How can people get involved, Steve, with your organization?
Sure. Yeah. If they go to our website, which is the numeral 2, A as in alpha, WNY, like WesternNewYork.com, the best way to do that is join. You can do it right off the main page. Join as a monthly member, pay once a month or pay a one-time fee for the year. That helps us do everything we're doing, from funding cases to doing case research. A big focus right now is actually it's expanding out the bench of attorneys that we have available to progress these cases, because Jim can't do it all. He's one guy. He's in the process of trying to step back and do this part-time and retire and do some activism in some other areas. So, a big focus for me going into 2020 is not only identifying attorneys in other parts of the state that could act as local counsel and work with us on cases, but going out to colleges that have Federalist Society chapters that would align with what we're trying to do here and cultivate the next generation of young attorneys who'd like to take on this work. Because what I've developed here when I'm working to expand is basically a cottage industry for these guys, where I'm not lacking for cases. And to some extent, the money to fund them is starting to build. That's what a lot of the membership dollars goes towards, is being able to fund these things so we can just, get a retainer set up and have Jim go on it. But, being able to feed bright, young, aggressive attorneys who want to make a difference here cases to be able to go ahead and get some wins for us. That's a big focus too.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing. And I think that you've really hit an important piece that I feel like the Second Amendment struggles with so much, and that's engaging with young people.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are probably the youngest guys in the game right now, and that's maybe a little bit of a broad stroke, but especially in New York, when I was very actively involved in Scope and some of the other organizations, there was a huge age gap.
Sure.
And many times by 30 plus years.
There still is.
And there still is. And we do need to get into the colleges and the schools and show people, hey, there's another side to what you're learning right now. And I found personally that if we get the opportunity to have a conversation, a lot more people agree with us than you'd think. They don't know it until the conversation happens, but by the end of the conversation, they're thinking, yeah, you know what? This makes a lot of sense. So.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, we're going to take our last break of the show. We're here on Radio Free New York, and we'll be back in a moment.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Fiorella, a family-owned farm-to-table Italian restaurant with casual atmosphere at the newly renovated Rochester Public Market. Fiorella offers wood-fired, old-world-style pizza with naturally leavened dough, house-made fresh pasta, desserts, and gelato. Enjoy craft beers, imported Italian and New York State wines. Open Wednesday through Saturday for lunch and dinner. Wednesday evenings enjoy no corkage fee, and Thursday is gnocchi night. Call 434-5705 for reservations. View the menu on the web, restaurantfiorella.com.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at Simple Tech has
Coming back.
interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
You're listening to Radio Free New York on the WYSL stations.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. We're in studio with Steve Filano from 2A WNY, and we're talking Second Amendment things. We're talking about wins. We're talking about ways to win, strategies, how we're losing on some things, and how the other side is beating us on a few things, and what we can do to do better. But something that we should talk about, and I did a show about this months and months ago, and I think it was titled something along the lines of "What does activism look like?" Mm-hmm. And I think that it's really appropriate for us to have a small discussion about what is working in terms of activism, because I think we're finding that money is really important, but activism is what's winning. And yes. I think that people need to know what type of activism is winning and how can they engage in activism so we can see more wins.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I try to talk about at all the group meetings and all the presentations I do, we have one coming up on red flag law actually tomorrow in Genesee County, is with respect to the Second Amendment movement, we haven't really done a good job of innovating on the activism front. So we talked a little bit earlier about media engagement, and I can elaborate on that in a bit too. But the other piece of this is sort of getting out of this linear mindset of like, you know, A plus B equals C, meaning, you know, if we want to reverse gun laws, then we have to elect Republicans, and then they pass a law or they introduce legislation, it gets passed, and the whole thing gets reversed, and we're all happy and everything's good forever. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like the way that we approached, you know, the Afghanistan war. We rolled in like we were going to fight a war of attrition. It was going to be World War II. Turned out that wasn't the case. We're talking about fourth generation asymmetric warfare here, and tactics needed to change. We kind of have that same mindset in fighting this culture war, which is, you know, we go in and we say we want to have these big rallies, we want to get the numbers out. And that's important, I think, to punctuate wins, to punctuate something important that's happened. But as a general mode of operating of that's how we're going to progress, you know, our response here, or maybe, you know, our first punch, not like waiting to get punched. That's probably not going to be super effective. And the legislation we've generally seen introduced in New York State by legacy Republicans, I think just hasn't been a really great idea. Like, for instance, with Chris Collins, the Saga bill, and other types of legislation that is all focused on federal supremacy, right? So saying, you know, hey, we're not going to allow New York State gun laws to be any more restrictive than federal gun laws. You're setting up a precedent where when we do get another far left Democrat in office, and we will, it will happen at some point.
Absolutely.
That will totally be used. Executive privilege or, you know, executive authority will totally be used to just nullify the Second Amendment and progress confiscation. You're setting yourself up for failure rather. And I know it's tempting, and it's a short-term emotional win to get something like that passed, and it's great for a legislator to say, I did that. Sure. But are you thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the road for the next generation who's then going to have to suffer under that, you know, somebody who's going to use that maliciously? I think a much better way to approach this is to drive the actual impact of these statutes down to the local level so that local legislators and counties can really decide what their impact is going to be. You can actually use an argument made by the state AG to do this, right? So the green light lawsuit, you may be familiar with that. So I had been saying for a few months now that Mickey Kearns is probably going to lose that lawsuit, and he did. And the reason is that the state actually made a very compelling 10th Amendment argument against Mr. Kearns, saying that, hey, the 10th Amendment says that the states do not have to offer up their own resources, law enforcement resources, to participate in federal enforcement of unconstitutional laws, what they feel to be unconstitutional. They also cite, to my delight here, the anti-commandeering rule, which specifically says, the federal government cannot commandeer state law enforcement to carry out these edicts. The same power dynamic exists between county and state governments. Yeah. And I think the legal argument should be made that because this relationship is virtually the same, the county also has an application of the 10th Amendment against the state. The 10th Amendment applies in this circumstance. And therefore, county officials who are passing these Second Amendment sanctuary ordinances, which is really just a statement of ideology, has no teeth. Yeah. They are capable, legally capable, of passing straight up laws that say no federal law enforcement officer, no county employee, the district attorney, they are forbidden from enforcing the SAFE Act, for instance. Doesn't mean that the state police cannot come in and enforce it themselves. Sure. But I think we all know they don't have the resources to do that county by county. So in effect, you're nullifying the law by doing that.
And they're more interested in writing highway tickets anyways.
Well, there's that too.
So they got to keep the money coming in somehow.
Sure. And there are many state police, individually whom, I'm sure a range of us have talked to who are not interested in enforcing the SAFE Act anyway. Yeah, absolutely. So you have that going on as well. But that more innovative approach to how do we nullify the impact of these laws, I know it's not as emotionally satisfying as saying, hey, we got this one single court decision that took the whole thing apart, which is probably very unlikely. Yeah. It's probably going to happen in pieces. Doing what I just articulated here achieves the same impact, and additionally sets up a situation where, like now, if you want to escape gun control in New York State, you have to leave the state. What if you just had to move a county over? Yeah. That's one piece. And then the other is that's something that survives basically for all time, this approach. Yep. So those are some things that we should be looking at. And then, of course, one of the things we touched upon earlier, which is, better media engagement, thinking more strategically about the events that we progress as a Second Amendment community and maybe turning on its head some of the stuff that every town does. Like, for instance, every June, Moms Demand Action in every town come together and they have this, Gun Violence Victims Awareness Month. It's all throughout the month of June, and June 10th or 11th, depending on what that weekend is, they have like a ceremony and they lay this wreath and everything. One of the things that we did in June is we had the day before a Gun Control Victims Awareness Day. And one of the things we talked about was all the victims of gun control in Venezuela, where they have a disarmed population since 2013, who are literally right now being murdered by agents of the government. You can look at what happened in Hong Kong over the past 24 hours. Protesters are being shot in the street. If you read the statutes that disarmed all these people, actually, when they're translated, almost word for word, portions of them read like the SAFE Act. Blanket bans on entire classes of firearms, ammunition limits, capacity limits. It's all the same type of stuff. And the interesting thing about some of these victims up to when we did this event in June is you can get their pictures online through human rights organizations. So Moms Demand Action always comes out and they put these pictures up. Well, there are a lot of victims of gun control that you can get pictures of as well. And so we put together our own wreath of all these gun control victims and basically preempted that. It got covered by numerous news outlets the day before and totally washed out the event that those folks were doing. And we've done quite a few of these throughout Western New York, to the point now where I've noticed that the Bloomberg-backed groups do not post their meetings anymore online. Of course. Because they've noticed that this is what will happen every time, and they've gotten some bad press off it. But the inability to hold public meetings without being rebutted and intelligently rebutted, and their fear of that, one says something about the quality of their advocates and the intelligence of their advocates. And then secondarily, if because of that they don't have public meetings anymore, it stunts their ability to recruit. Yeah, and grow and everything else. I mean, that's a great thing. You look at when Cuomo won, not this most recent election, but the one before that, his schedule used to be published on the governor's website. Right. And anywhere he was going to speak and have an engagement was there, open to the public. Well, people started coming together and showing up to his public events. And it wasn't just Second Amendment people. It was the teachers and other people like that. They started showing up. Guess whose schedule came off the website? Right. And whose schedule closed up? And I mean, that's such an important thing, because if you're out here pushing gun control and we show up and we say, nope, you're wrong, here's why, look at all the people who have died because of your ideology, and they stop having meetings, awesome. Now they're not growing. Now they're on the defensive. That's the switch we need to make. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, anyone who's going to come in and make the gun control argument needs to know that we're going to be there, and and there's going to be an intelligent reply back to them. Or in our instance, there's going to be actually an event that happens before yours, where we make an intelligent argument against what we know you're going to say.
Yeah. And that's maybe one of the beautiful things about how they operate is they haven't changed their message in a really long time. Yeah. And so you already know exactly what they're going to say. You already know the angles that they're going to approach it from. And they are very easy to dispute. Mm-hmm. There's data there and everything. It's just normally people never hear that part.
Oh, correct. So. And generally the responses we have to their talking points are, I guess, for lack of a better term, unrebuttable. When we file our court briefs, and everyone that Jim has done to date, for the most part, cites the government tyranny argument, which, none of the other large Second Amendment groups ever talk about because they're primarily funded and backed by legislators. And so they're not going to go into a court setting and say the government could kill you. Yeah, although we have reams of data and information proving to the contrary. And you can, again, just look at Hong Kong, Venezuela, which is right in our hemisphere, and, the Uyghur population in China. This stuff is happening right now. And under similar circumstances that we're driving towards through, the government mandates that we have in place in this country. And when you push the government in court to answer for that, they don't, because there is no answer. Yeah. They have no way of, aside from saying, well, we really hope that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. And we have institutions in place to guard against that. Well, on the leftist side of this argument, they're all saying that Trump is destroying our institutions and they're all falling apart around us. They're not an effective safeguard anymore. Well, if you believe that, then you have to be a believer in the Second Amendment as the most effective check against government tyranny.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny because I think that the left has pulled proponents for the Second Amendment. They've tried so hard to pull them to the center that a lot of times the argument switches from tyranny to hunting.
Sure.
And that, I think, was probably one of the biggest blows to our movement ever, because that's not what it was about. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here on Radio Free New York. Steve, where do they go again on the website?
It's numeral 2, A as in Alpha, WNY, so 2AWNY.com.
All right, guys, I'll catch you later.